You are listening to Claret and Blue, an Aston Villa podcast brought to you by Birmingham Live.
Hello and welcome to our preview of Aston Villa versus West Bromwich Albion coming up on Sunday. I'm James Rushton, that's Joe Chapman. Today we're here to talk you through the upcoming West Midlands derby. But Joe, how are you getting on? Big week for Baggies.
Oh, it's taken it out of me, James, to be honest with you. Wasn't prepared for it. We've got the January window on our doorstep and we've got... a derby that was already penciled in, and to kind of top things off, we've got a sacking and an appointment in the same day. So all those things, and an unveiling, and it couldn't be any busier at this point in the year.
So I guess the first thing we need to talk about is Bilic's departure. I mean, I think I speak for us both when we say like he seemed to be a fairly well respected and especially well liked guy at the Hawthorn. So what happened there? What led to? I mean, we know the results. The wins were hard to come by this year, even in the late stages of the championship. But what happened there? Because I think from the outside perspective, a lot of people were shocked, even with the result.
Yeah, it's happened before. It's quite similar to the Darren Moore one. I think really a lot of people from outside looking in would think, what on earth are they doing as a football club? I think you've probably got to go back almost to the beginning of 2020, maybe even just after Christmas last year, where the results really took a downward turn. They got themselves back on track with a couple of signings in the January window. Callum Robinson was one of the really, really key signings that they made last winter, and there was a bit of an upturn. I think they won 5 or 6 games in February, and he won the Manager of the Month award. And then lockdown came, and I don't think that really worked in his favour because they were on a bit of a run again. And it just set them back. The players didn't come back with the same vigour. And if you were following the Championship last season, you'll have known all about Brentford's run and the way that they were kind of hot on the heels of Albion throughout. So all things considered, they did kind of limp over the line. And then, of course, we're not so lucky as our dear neighbours at Villa and Wolves. We haven't got an owner that's going to throw hundreds of millions of pounds at it. So we were told basically... or rather the board at Albion were told, you've got to work what you've got. And people assume, well, a club like that's going to get 100 million quid in promotion money. But it very quickly is frittered away with, you've got to take into account the loss of revenue that they've had to cope with in the last 9 or 10 months. Then you've got the fact that there were promotion bonuses for the players and the staff. It left them with about 20-25 million quid that they could really spend there. And then they've been, and Bilic would put his foot down and said, I want to bring these loanees back, including Robinson, Pereira, Diangana, all of them were back together. And so they left you with very, very little by way of money to spend throughout the current squad that they've got. I actually think they've probably put up quite a decent fight. And certainly when you compare them to Sheffield United, they've put up more of a fight, certainly. And I think it's easy. You can look at the cold, hard numbers, which is what the club have had to do. 1 win in 17 games spanning 2 seasons is not going to get you very far. So they got 7 points from the first 13 games. They clearly think that, and certainly Luke Dowling, the technical director at the unveiling yesterday, said we need to move now because we wanted Sam Allardyce. If we left it another month or so, Sam might have got a job elsewhere. So we had to move now, and they did so. And it sounds really ruthless. And on the back of that City point that they got the other night, it sparked the reaction that it got, which was Albion fans who are absolutely overwhelmingly annoyed with this appointment and not appointment, but the sacking. And a lot of them have been pretty underwhelmed with the appointment. Allardyce has got a great track record, but when you think of everything, you take everything into consideration. You look at the style of football, perceived style of football that he adopts, the fact that he's got Wolves links. Those kind of things have kind of gone against him immediately before he's even walked through the door. So I'm sure a win over Villa on Sunday would certainly work in his favour.
Well, certainly from my perspective, I hope not. But short time for Sam Allardyce to kind of turn things around. Look, he is a massively experienced manager, a massively experienced coach. He's been around the block, so to speak. He's been, at Bolton, West Ham. He's been in this situation, especially with Sunderland as well. The Great Escape they managed to pull off. So he's been in this situation before. He knows what to do. I know there's only a short little bit of turnaround from his appointment to the Villa game. So what can he, impact in that short time? Do Villa fans, would Villa as well expect a different Baggies team from the one he turned up and played so well against Man City?
It's very, very difficult to really see what he can do significantly. I've got to be honest. He said that as much pretty much at his press conference yesterday, it was a case of we've just got to kind of hope that there's a bit of a bounce from the players, just based on the fact that there's been a change of management alone, because we see that a lot of the time. You see managers when they're appointed and they might be in the stands before they've been appointed, and the players just turn up. The players kind of playing as if they know that they've got a new man to impress, that they've got to try and all of a sudden play just that little bit better to keep their shirt. And so that's what I would expect from Albion. They've got a few players missing that I think will play big parts throughout the course of the season on Sunday. So they're going to have to deal with those. But generally speaking, you want to see it. And bottom line is, whether it was Bilic or Allardyce in charge, it's Aston Villa. It's a local derby. It's their first local derby of the season. Yeah. It's at home, albeit there's no fans there. So you'd want to see that anyway. You'd want to see that extra edge to their game, regardless of who was in charge in the dugout, or in Allardyce's case, up above in the gantry.
So again, from a Villa perspective, the last time we played was that segment of semi-final games that led to Villa's promotion. For me, it was a nightmarish 2 games, because you had the heroics of the first leg, then the nightmare that the second was. It was that second leg was absolute torture. And I know that Villa did come out on top, but everyone went through the ringer in that one. It went to the last minute dramatic penalty shootout where almost anything that could happened, bar people getting sent off during the actual shootout. So is it a different Albion team now we're seeing now from that team? What's changed in the meantime? What can we expect?
Yeah, they freshened things up last summer. So last summer, they obviously, players like that team really that actually took part in that penalty shootout. You can't make excuses, but it was so unrecognisable, because Gale was missing, because Robson Kanu was missing, Brunt had been sent off, Rodriguez had been subbed off, Phillips had been subbed off. They had no attackers that were taking part in that penalty shootout. It was infuriating knowing that Villa were making changes to take penalties. So that was really, really frustrating. So you look back at that general squad that maybe didn't play in that particular game, but over the course of that season, they had to deal with Rodriguez and Gale being missing. In terms of the goals, they actually were just a little bit more thrifty, I thought, in terms of the actual players they went after. They went and signed Darnell Furlong, who was an actual out-and-out right-back, something they didn't really have before. He's been good, generally speaking. He's been good over the course of the last 18 months. Shemi Ajayi is somebody that I got really, really high hopes for in terms of his long-term future. He's a centre-half that he was man of the match for me, or certainly one of the key performers at Man City the other night, but he's still only 25, 26 years old. He's got a big, big future in the game, I think, at this level. So yeah, it was very, very clear that the goals that were missing from Rodriguez and Gale had to be spread around more evenly across the course around the squad, and they did that. Diangana chipped in, Pereira chipped in, Austin and Robson Kanu got 10 or 11 apiece. So there wasn't an out-and-out striker. They still haven't got that striker. They're still waiting for Carlin Grant to really catch fire, and get a bit of a return on the efforts that they put into getting him, which took pretty much all summer. So there'd be no better time than on Sunday to kind of impress the new manager and down Villa in the process. That would be nice. But I mean, I suppose generally speaking, they just seem a little bit more together. I think the Albion fan base, certainly last season, took to them more. And speaking to Carl Bartley, who is one of the injured players on Sunday, he said as much last season to me in an interview. He said, this squad here is more collective. The season before, it was about individuals. How can I, basically get a top flight move, rather than let's work to get West Bromwich Albion back to the top flight. So I think that's something that's really, really kind of worked in their favour. There definitely seems to be a unity there.
Speaking of that unity, then they'll probably need that to kind of stop a free-flowing attack in Villa side, but what looks like in the start of the season anyway, to be a team that will attack at will. I think yesterday Burnley weren't able to stop Villa having 27 attempts on goal, and look, Villa didn't score, but I can't see that kind of match happening over and over again where Villa don't score. So if West Brom were to say, let Villa have 25, 20 shots on goal unchallenged, there's a high chance they'll score. So what will West Brom do to stop Villa? What will they do to stop Jack Grealish, I guess?
It'll be interesting, actually, in the way they set up, because in Bilic's last game against Man City, they set up differently. So for pretty much the whole of the season, bar 1 or 2 games, they've gone with the back 3, and it didn't work at Newcastle. Branislav Ivanovic had a bit of a nightmare, so he got dropped at City. Bartley being injured meant that he only really had 2 centre-halves that he was going to consider. So they went with the back 4, And Ajayi and Dar O'Shea, who's another very, very young defender, were both brilliant. They were both absolutely magnificent. And of course, when you go to a place like Man City, you've got to go and deal with players like, Aguero came off the bench. They had players like Sterling and Foden and De Bruyne. You need a bit of luck, and Sam Johnston was incredible. But I think if you're kind of going forwards, you'd want to see more of that. I think certainly the impact Allardyce can have. You want to see more disruption in the midfield. I think Albion is something that has been aimed at them this season by way of criticism, is that they've been probably too easy to play against. They've missed a Claudio Jacob type player who would really, really be a pain in the backside for any creative midfielders. Who wouldn't stray away from his two centre halves. He would just stay there and protect them. And that's something that they're missing. Romain Sawyers has been asked to do that job, and Jake Livermore's been asked to do that job, but they're not naturals at it. So that's going to be something they're really going to have to overcome. I don't know whether that's something Allardyce is going to address in January, but it'll be interesting to see how exactly they set up as a midfield. Conor Gallagher's been wonderful since he signed on loan from Chelsea, but again, he's not that kind of player. He's got too much energy. He wants to get up and down the pitch, and he's added a couple of goals to his game recently. So that'll be something they've got to overcome in the short term, I think, and certainly looking on Sunday, Grealish and the other midfielders, Ross Barkley, whether he's going to be fit or not, we don't know. So that's something they're going to have to do. I think just disrupt that flow of Villa, because I know that Villa, man for man, are a better side and will have opportunities over the course of 90 minutes. There's just no way they won't. So yeah, there'll be a bit of luck needed. Johnston, I've been no doubt as he has with every game this season, will be called into action. It's more it's more just kind of basically how they can cope with that over the course of 90.
Who's the main man for Albion then? And I guess if there's no particular main man at the moment, who is the not necessarily the hidden gem, but who would Sam Allardyce have seen in the back of his training sessions and identified as someone who can probably come in, not necessarily from the shadows, but come in to have a major impact that who probably didn't so in Bilic's team?
I mean, yeah, there were one or two players that were pretty frozen out under Bilic. And then, rather ironically, they were a couple of players that actually got a look in again, just as he was about to be sacked. So, I mean, before 2 weeks ago, Charlie Austin and Kamil Grosicki hadn't kicked the Premier League ball this season. So that they're two players that have all of a sudden got a fresh lease of life, I suppose, in terms of an opportunity to play. Sam Fields. Going back to my point about disrupting rhythms of opponents, Sam Fields a potential midfielder that could come in, provided he's fully fit again. So he's had a few injury problems recently. He could potentially be that person in midfield that sits deepest and breaks up the play. And then, of course, you've got, in terms of defenders, and I said about this earlier with the defenders that Bilic was picking from, there is Cedric Kipper as well, who was a shining light in the Wigan team that went down. And he hasn't played a Premier League game either. And you've got Kenneth Zohore, who's out on loan until January at Millwall. So there are, a handful of players there that all of a sudden have got another opportunity to impress a manager, provided that Allardyce goes in there with no airs or graces and just says, everybody's got a chance, everybody starts playing, and I'll pick on merit.
I've got to ask you about Callum Robinson, because there's a few former villains that have turned up at the Hawthorns, haven't there, recently? I know Gareth Barry's no longer there, but of course Sam Johnston seems to be dealing very well with anything thrown at him. But talking about goalkeepers can be fairly boring, even if we're mentioning Johnston and Martinez. So I want to talk about Callum Robinson, someone who can be a bit more dynamic. How's he been getting on because he moved for a record fee to Sheffield United, and then he came across to Albion, which seems a bit crazy. And now he seems to have found a home.
Yeah, I think that was one of the really, really decent signings of the summer, actually, for Albion as regards to the value, in that they basically just traded him with Oliver Burke, who was a complete flop, who just never worked. It was a very expensive signing as well. It never really took off at all in the time he was at Albion, and it just worked. Robinson was more than happy to come back. He knew he was going to get an opportunity to play in the Premier League, something that wasn't the case at Sheffield United. The systems that Albion had adopted over the course of the 6 months he was in the Championship suited him better. So there was an obvious role for him in the team. He's a very, very bubbly character. I mean, he is somebody that is very, very likeable. Besides what he actually offers on the pitch, I think he's a very, very positive influence in the dressing room and on the training pitch. And certainly before games, you can hear him kind of. He's just a character, before a game, he's somebody that makes his teammates laugh, and the coaching staff. So he's been a very welcome addition, I think. Somebody that he's a good age, he's on a long contract now at Albion. He's got a real opportunity to kind of put down some roots, I think. Why do you think it never really worked out at Villa then, James? I mean, if we're looking back at that time, I realise they were a Premier League team, but they were a Premier League team that were on the down, and you wonder now, in hindsight, as it is a great thing, whether he might have had more of a chance under, I think, was it Sherwood at the time?
Yeah, I think it was that. He was in pre-season as well, scoring a few goals, and he never got a chance. Everyone was kind of highly rating him, not necessarily alongside Jack Grealish, but as someone who could perform in an area Villa were kind of weak in. But I guess it benefited the player to go. Like, Villa were never going to use him for whatever reason. They never used many youth talents very well. You saw even Daniel Johnson go to Preston for 50 grand, and then he's doing well in the Championship, and Villa then land at that level, and they're looking at players like Daniel Johnson just a few years later. So kind of the short-termism, I guess, he was a victim of. But yeah, no, I think he would have made an impact, but that would have been because Villa would have went down, and by necessity he'd have been put in the team. But as with all Villa players, I'm really glad that even people like Nathan D'Alfonso is still involved in the game, getting paid to play football. So it is good to see people like Barry Bannon, even Gary Gardner to some extent. I know he's at the Blues, but Callum Robinson doing well as well. Even loan players like Sam Johnson. It's good to see people who've come through Villa carry on playing elsewhere or come through the academy, making having a career in football. So it's very encouraging to see, especially with our two academies. And someone I need to mention and is Louis Barry, because I don't think we've had the chance to speak face to face on the podcast about everything that's happened from Baggies to Barcelona to Villa, and now he's ripping it up in the under-18s. I know he's not going to be involved at all on Sunday, so there's not going to be any kind of drama involved in that. But I wanted to just pick your brain on that. What, from your Baggies perspective, how did that all go down?
Yeah, like a lead balloon, as you probably imagine. I think, to be honest with you, I don't really think. I mean, yeah, the Villa thing was perhaps they took advantage of a situation. That's totally, good luck to them. But I think with the Barcelona thing, just drove you mad last year. I still don't even know if Albion have even been given the compensation yet, because Barcelona are just this kind of global entity that feel like they can kind of almost just take players off other football clubs without really having to worry about any. It's spare change to them as well, what they'd be getting, what they'd be giving Albion as regards to Barcelona. But it's more the principle, I think, isn't it? It's more you don't want to be seen to be bullied, for academy players. So the money itself, it was, negligible in footballing terms. But I think generally it's pretty great. And of course, Albion aren't the only victims of that either. Barcelona have done that before, but he's somebody that, of course, Villa know all about now, don't they? With kind of the West Bromwich Albion Academy light at Bodymore Heath now. So they know all about exactly his talents, and he's somebody that I have no doubt at all has got a big, big future, because he put the ball in front of him in the penalty area, you score a bucket load of goals.
Well, going back to Sunday's match, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on how Villa have progressed under Dean Smith in your eyes, because I remember when we've talked before, he was up for the Albion job when Darren Moore was going for it. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah,
so
was, yeah.
How has that progressed in your eyes?
I think it's a match made in heaven, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Look from the outside looking in. I know there have been bumps in the road, of course. The money that's been spent, the more there's expectations at a club like Villa. But ultimately, you've got, it's a bit of a dream scenario, isn't it? You've got a captain, you've got a manager who are dyed in the wool for Villa fans, and they're both representing their club, which seems to be on the up. I think the ownership's been something that's been a huge success so far. I think besides just putting money into the squad, I think, you look at, I saw the news the other day about the plans for the academy, and that tells you that they're a football club that are looking long term, which is very, very positive way forward. I think with Dean Smith, I like Dean Smith. I do like Dean Smith. I think he's a very, very talented manager. I think he's a very, very talented coach. What I've been impressed with is how he's managed to address the problems, I think, that there were last season that would have otherwise have cost Villa their Premier League status. So, the transfer window's been a bit hit and miss, and I know it's not been all his way. there are a bit of a recruitment team going on there, but the defence, I think that was something I was going to ask you about. Really, all of a sudden, I know Albion don't score many goals, but all of a sudden Villa are a different proposition, aren't they, defensively? They're not a team that are going to give goals away, certainly not as easily as they would have done 12 months ago.
I think I'll go to kind of, again, the Burnley match yesterday. There's a chance that they make all the time, which is like, a diagonal from the wing. It seems to be the right flank to Chris Wood, who rises up, header to the top corner. Whether he's in the 6-yard box, on the penalty spot, he's scoring that kind of 8 times out of 10. I mean, you saw a version of it in the match last season, Villa versus Burnley, where he just nods it past Tom Heaton. There's nothing they can do. They score that goal, they get the 1-0 win, the smash and grab 1-0 win, because that's what Burnley can do. Yesterday it didn't happen. They had that chance, and Villa, Courtney Hawes can win everything aerial. He managed to kind of disrupt Wood. Wood still got the header off, and it was a good header. And again, Emi Martinez saved it. I know we said speaking about goalkeepers is boring, but I can't speak highly enough of Emiliano Martinez, because he has been fantastic. I didn't think you'd need to buy another goalkeeper, let alone 20 million on a goalkeeper. Martinez has changed my opinion on that completely. He has transformed Villa at the back, and his leadership, the distribution, the handling, the shot stopping, or the whole package, it goes so well with players like Tyrone Mings, who gets a lot of slack because he can be too casual on the ball, he can make errors, but 9 times out of 10 he's the one captain in the Villa side from the back. He can see everything, and he's always making sure everyone knows where they need to be. Even if he's overstepping the mark himself, he's letting everyone know what they need to do and where they need to be. So it's that organisation that even on the flanks, Matt Targett's vocal as well. Surprisingly, it's something I picked up yesterday when I was at the game. They're always communicating, always talking in a way that never usually happened. They're all telling each other, they're all probably overstepping their mark and telling each other exactly what they think of them, where they need to be. So that vocal, the communication has been so key for Villa, as well as the ability. I mean, Ezri Konsa was fantastic until the illness. Courtney Hawes comes in, wins everything aerial, commanding game, could have won the game. So Villa's defence, I mean, the coaching involved in that to get the players comfortable on the ball, to get them speaking to each other, it's been from the top to bottom fantastic. Again, it can be exploited. We've seen that. But yeah, if we're speaking highly of Villa scoring goals, we need to speak highly of Villa being kind of solid at the back as well, which is really nice for once, Joe.
I suppose it's a bit of almost a last season, there's been a hell of a bout of bad luck for Tom Heaton, hasn't there? Because he seemed, for me, from the outside looking in, he seemed to me the solution to the ongoing goalkeeper problem that they had. Whereas Martinez seems to have really kind of taken that to another level. And I know that, Johnston, who I think you could probably stop the polls already now. I think Johnston will be Albion's player of the season already, because he's been absolutely phenomenal. He seems to have gone up a level this season in better company. He probably would have been a Villa player, wouldn't he? But for that summer. Yeah. So, I mean, it feels like, you're right. You're probably talking goalkeepers, maybe not the most glamorous position on the pitch, and perhaps don't always get the credit they deserve. But you think, well, actually, we've got 2 goalkeepers that are going to be playing on Sunday that are both at a certain level.
Well, if you look at the way the game might go, if you're talking about what we're talking about, that Villa will attack, they might play like they did yesterday. They might have the lion's share of the chances. That means that either at end, the goalkeeper has to step up to prevent that narrative. Either it's Martinez, if Baggies have a handful of shots on target, no disrespect intended at all. But if they've had that handful of shots on target and Martinez has to be on the top, he might not be doing anything all game, might face 3 in the 90th minute, and he has to stop all of them, and they could come from absolutely anywhere. Whereas Johnson at the other end has to do what he's done all season, which is just keep on top of it as much as he can do, which he's done fantastically. The save against Man City the other day, it's peak Sam Johnson. We really didn't get on very well with Sam Johnson when he first joined, because we bought Pielegi Galini in, thought he was going to be the next big thing. Sam Johnson comes in all of a sudden, he doesn't perform brilliantly, but then he had his loan spells extended. We begin to love him, and then he has to depart, and then he goes to Albion, plays against us in the playoff. So it's all drama. But look, I think we did say speaking about goalkeepers isn't the most fashionable thing. It could be very boring, but goalkeepers make a difference, as we see all the time. It's a shame Villa weren't able to test Nick Pope too much yesterday. I hope they test Sam Johnson a lot more. But Joe, before we go, I need to get a prediction from you. Villa versus Baggies. How do you think it's going to go, mate?
I mean, it's not the 11 that I would have in terms of Albion, because I know they've got 3 or 4 players that I'm sure would play. So it's a shame that at least until they go to Villa Park later in the season, they're not going to have a fully strength team. I've still got a side with Albion. I still think that Allardyce could have an immediate impact. He's done it before, where I think this first game in charge of Sunderland, they beat Newcastle with Allardyce in charge, if I'm not mistaken. So he kind of knows what it is to win a derby in his first game in charge. It's a shame about the fans not being there. I think Albion, who looked good defensively the night, are going to have to hold Villa at bay. I don't think they score many goals. I'm going to tip them to nick a 1-0 win.
I'm going to go I'll flip that over, then I'll go the 1-0 win for Villa, and I'll make it difficult because they might have a bag full of shots, but I think they're not going to. They haven't got the finish on them at the moment. They need to kind of get a lot more comfortable shooting. Hopefully, they'll have 27 more shots to practice they get those shooting boots on. But yeah, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that's it for now. So we'll catch up after Sunday, I guess, and the next instalment of the West Midlands derby, one of the highlights of the fixture list for Villa fans and Baggies fans, of course. It's always nice to have a proper local derby, not this Villa versus Wolves rubbish where there's no rivalry there. But yeah, nice to have you on, Joe. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you all for listening as well. So cheers, and we'll catch you later.
Thank you for listening to Claret and Blue, an Aston Villa podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please let us know. We love hearing your feedback. We'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, up the Villa.